We thought it would be helpful to do a bit of a session around refunds, cancellations and postponements. Now, it's really important to stress this is not a legal session. It is really important that you get legal advice if you have any queries, concerns, and this is very much just looking at what other businesses are doing in case that helps you form your decisions on what you should be doing. So first of all, we will look at the 3 different situations that you're likely to be facing at the moment. First of all, we have got couples that are cancelling or postponing because their contracts are frustrated. So that means the government have made it very clear their wedding cannot go ahead as they had originally planned. So to establish the as they had originally planned, look at what it was you sold to them. What was the dream that was sold to them? Is it going to be different from that? And the chances are that it is. The next we'll look at is those couples, so typically those from April onwards, who have just either had cold feet or they've changed their mind, they're wanting to do something completely different, but there's no reason to think that it's definitely going to be frustrated, so you're dealing with normal terms and conditions. And the third one is those couples that perhaps have got weddings planned for February and March, and with the fast changing position from the point of view of vaccines and rapid testing, we can't be 100% sure that those contracts are going to be frustrated. I think we're all fairly realistic on the fact that they probably will be, but how do you deal with those? So starting first of all with cancellation policies for frustrated contracts. So the CMA originally gave some really unhelpful information for couples, saying that in most cases they should be entitled to a full refund, and there's just exceptional circumstances under which the cost that has been incurred by the venue or the business could be deducted from that refund. Really not helpful. They then updated that to say that actually no, it was in a lot of cases there should be costs incurred because costs deducted because costs have been incurred. But they then suggested that those costs should be split 50-50 with the couple, with the business and the couple both taking half of those costs. Again, businesses didn't quite see that that was going to work. That didn't quite seem fair, and it certainly doesn't encourage businesses to help couples who are wanting to plan weddings during uncertain times. It seemed to be a real own goal. Since then, there has been a well-documented case where a venue group has established that not only could they charge for their direct costs incurred, but also some of their running costs on the run up to that wedding. So accepting that some of those maintenance costs of the venue and the grounds were part of the cost for that wedding. So that has changed the arena quite a lot. What does this mean to you as a business or a venue? Probably doesn't change much, because most businesses were already using a common sense approach. Most businesses already had a very fair policy. We know this because there's actually been very, very, very few complaints. Those that have complained, obviously, excuse me, are quite well documented. We hear a lot about those. What we don't hear about is all those many tens of thousands of very, very happy couples, or at least we hear about them here, but they don't make it onto the media. So if your policy is fair and transparent, you've been able to explain to the couple why you're deducting what you're deducting. In most cases, they are perfectly happy. As a rule of thumb, very often that's based on the deposit. It might be based on a proportion of the total costs. But clearly, as a business, you wouldn't feel that it's fair if you haven't delivered the service on the day to then charge the couple in full. If all you have done is filled in an order form and held a date that you then couldn't sell to anyone else because of COVID, so in other words, in situations where it's frustrated, in that situation where all you've done is filled in a form, charging them £500 for filling in a form is probably not reasonable. So just make sure that what you're doing is fair and reasonable. There is a huge variation we have noticed between businesses, but generally most people are finding that somewhere around 10%, 15%, some cases 25, 30%. All of those aren't unusual as the total contract cost to be deducting once you've worked out what those direct costs have been. So from the point of view of cancellation, where it is not a frustrated contract, so from April onwards, for example, you then revert to your normal terms and conditions. But the CMA are stressing that those terms and conditions must be fair. So what makes them fair? One of the really good ways to calculate it is looking at the cost of doing business. So this is the cost of running your business in order to deliver that wedding and working that out as a sort of reasonable proportion of that. Again, go back to that logic test. What have you delivered for this couple? How much has it really cost you to hold that date open for them? There is potentially that loss of opportunity if you can't fill it. So working it out based on that is a very fair way to do it. One of the ways that businesses have found that they have really maintained their relationship with their couples very well is to have a clause in there that if that date can resell, that the couple will get a much bigger refund. So if you are charging something for that loss of opportunity. The reason that works so well is it's not in that couple's interest to then be putting things out all over social media that you haven't looked after them as well as they might have thought that you should. So they are going to be keen for somebody else to take that slot. It's in their interest to support you in reselling that. And finally, if the contract is assumed as frustrated, so these are going to be the ones typically that last weekend in March, no one really knows what to do with that, or for a big wedding in April where it's probably not going to go ahead, but maybe not. You're in that lovely grey area which can be quite helpful to you. Is it down to your terms and conditions, which you can deduct a lot more usually if that's the case, rather than frustrated contract, which should really just be the cost that you've actually incurred. So use that to your benefit. We would certainly encourage that if you have a couple who are wanting to cancel now for a wedding that hasn't yet been frustrated, you may find you have the better negotiating powers by letting them cancel now. Don't wait until a time that the Prime Minister announces that weddings in April can't go ahead the size that your couple is planning, because you then fall into frustrated contracts. So just bear that in mind. If you feel they are going to cancel no matter what, let them do it early. Do it under your terms and conditions. Don't wait until it becomes frustrated, if at all possible. So postponements are a little bit different. So in the terms of if it is a frustrated contract, you are required under CMA guidance. They say by law you need to make sure the couple is aware they're also entitled to a full refund. We're aware not many businesses or venues tend to do that, because most couples would just say, thank you very much, I'll take the refund and I'll take my chances that your prices haven't gone up and I want to rebook. We're aware most most businesses aren't doing that, but that's what the CMA say you should be doing. So just keep that at the back of your mind. The other point that they make is that the couple can't be worse off as a result of postponing. So that means that you shouldn't put clauses in that weren't there in their original contract if that means they're worse off. You shouldn't be giving them a worse date or a cheaper package. It should be that they're just postponing like for like. The CMA actually quite like the idea that you would give them an incentive to postpone, but we're not hearing that businesses are tending to do that. At the very most, what they're doing as the incentive is they're moving the payments to the new date. So again, that would fit with making sure the couple aren't worse off for the new arrangements. That's actually giving them an incentive to move. So that will mean instead of the final payment being due on their original wedding date, it will be due on or 4 weeks before, or whatever your terms are, the new wedding date. So from the point of view of insurance, that was giving us our guidance right at the beginning. Insurance companies said, or some of the insurance companies were saying that A postponement can't cost more than 25% of the original contract price. CMA guidance seems to be very different from that. CMA guidance seems to be that you shouldn't be charging anything, but most people we have found are charging either nothing in order to postpone, which is certainly would be the recommended position and the safer position from the point of view of the CMA, or they're charging an administration fee to move, which is then really helpful because that means you can charge it potentially each time the wedding's postponed, or they're charging the difference between the original date and the new date. Some businesses are charging less, so venues in particular, some are charging less if the new date is an off-peak date. It is just a few, but just be aware there are a few that are doing that. Most are going on the reckoning that if you change from a Saturday to a Friday, you're paying exactly the same. But the difficulty will then come for second and third postponements. So let's say you've got a couple that started on a Saturday, they moved to a Friday because that was the only date that was available. You don't charge them anything for that, you don't refund them, but they're then needing to postpone again and then postponing back to a Saturday. You probably shouldn't charge them the uplift if their original date was a Saturday. Hopefully that makes sense. The biggest challenges that we're hearing about from the point of view of postponement is that the couple doesn't consult with all of their suppliers, so they're finding they postpone the date with their venue, for example, but suppliers aren't available. That's then leading to cancellation. So we'd really, really encourage any businesses to encourage the bride to speak to all of the suppliers to try and avoid that situation. Lots of difficulties are coming about because of the length of time it's taking for these postponements to happen. Originally, it was a few months. It's now looking like a much longer time period, and some venues are using this time to do major refurbishment. The couple are potentially getting a much better package. Make sure they're aware of that. It might not be something that you can charge more for. Some businesses are charging more if, for example, it's facilities that the couple wouldn't need to have access to. So let's say a barn extension and they could just use the original barn. But if it is refurb, make sure they're aware that they're getting this much better package. Really, really helpful from the point of view of ongoing relationships. So changes to the venue, shouldn't you charge extra if you have significantly changed the venue and therefore your prices are going up. Probably wouldn't be seen as being fair because the couple, that's going to be the situation where the couple might then say they wouldn't have booked it if they knew that was going to be the price. Therefore, they would rather cancel and go elsewhere. Lots of difficulties with the most popular venues with dates just not being available, particularly during the school holidays and weekends. Now that these postponements are spreading into 2022, that's much, much less of a concern. The final big question that's worth just establishing your policy on is how far away from the wedding date will you allow couples to postpone their wedding? Now, we spoke earlier about the danger of a date becoming frustrated. So let's say you've got a couple in April who now want to change their date. You're in a much, much better position to negotiate with them if you allow them to postpone now before that date is frustrated. All of the power is with you and the couple will be much, much happier. So just worth bearing in mind, the earlier you can allow them to postpone, if you know that wedding probably does need to be postponed and nobody knows, this is very much one of those business decisions. What do you feel your venue will be able to cope with in April? What do you think about the vaccine options? What do you think about the rapid testing and making your own decisions on that? But with all of it, the really, really important thing to think about is your policy fair and kind to your couples as well as to your business? Are you going to be coming out of this with your reputation as much as possible intact? With people feeling like you have treated them fairly? If so, the chances are you've got the policy right. But if you do get into a dispute, really, really important to get some good independent legal advice. Do not just rely on the information from the CMA. We are already establishing that is flawed. If you're not a member of the Wedding Venue Support Group, so the WVSG, it's worth joining. I believe it's £350, and they'll be able to give you information on the CMA guidance and potentially contracts for the future. So it's wvsg.org to go ahead and join that. Really hope this has helped. Thank you.